Hey folks, I wanted to introduce to you your challenge for this week and also to prep you a little bit for next week. As soon as I post this video, I am going to make two things live, and that'll be part of week 3 and the week 2 lab as well. So, Sunday, your minerals practical will go live. Your minerals practical is 50 points. It's your first of 4 lab practicals, and I wanted to introduce the whole concept of the lab practical to you. You do not have to have this lab practical proctored. And I want you to prepare for it as though you had no identification charts in front of you, because in fact, you wouldn't be able to complete this lab if you went into it anticipating having all of your papers in front of you the entire time. You have 45 minutes to complete this lab practical, and there will be a series of 50 questions each that are 1 point each. Some of them will be multiple questions on the same mineral, and some of them will have a question per mineral. And I'm going to talk to you about the way you can prepare for that practical. In fact, this week's entire lab is just focused on getting you prepared for next week's practical. There are things you'll have to know for next week's practical, like you should be able to look at pictures and videos of minerals and identify their luster, their cleavage, their streak, their name, and some of their miscellaneous properties. By far, the 2 hardest components of this are identifying the number of directions of cleavage that a mineral has and the name of the mineral. You'll get better at both the more you work on this. In addition to those properties and names, the third component that you will be tested on is 5 chemical formulas for this test. And the reason I have you memorize these partly is that some of them will help you to identify the minerals, and some of them are just important for the course because there's a lot of overlap between lecture and lab. So these are those 5 chemical compositions to know. So there's calcite, which is the mineral that reacts with acid. The reason it reacts with acid is actually illuminated in its chemical formula, which is 1 atom of calcium and what's called the carbonate ion. So when you put acid on calcite, it bubbles because carbon dioxide, or CO2, is freed from the mineral, and that's actually the bubbles that are forming. So that actually helps you to remember that calcite is the one that bubbles because it has trapped carbon dioxide within it, or CO2. The next one that I think is important for identification is the chemical formula of hematite. Now there's both a metallic and non-metallic variety of hematite, but what's consistent is that they both have a red streak. And if you look at the word hema, it means, that word part means like blood, like hemophiliac or hemoglobin are both related to blood. And if you look at the chemical formula, you see why it has a red streak. When you powder hematite, you are basically weathering some iron oxide, which is the chemical formula for iron is Fe. And so the red streak that you see is due to the presence of iron in the hematite. And again, that's actually something that we touch on multiple times over the semester. The final mineral that I think is really important to know its formula for identification is galena. Galena is a metallic mineral, and it has 3 directions of cleavage that meet at 90 degrees, but it also has a high specific gravity, and that is also illustrated in its chemical formula, which is PbS. And so that stands for 1 atom of lead, and lead is what makes that really, really dense. And then the second is sulfur. But again, the density of galena, it's due to the presence of lead. So that's why I think those 3 are important to know. Quartz and halite, quite frankly, are minerals that we talk about regularly over the semester, and so I think it's important to your understanding of both lecture and lab. Quartz, the chemical formula is silicon dioxide, or SiO2, and the chemical formula for halite, or which is basically salt, is sodium chloride, or NaCl. Now I want you to know that all of the names will be present on the practical next week, and so will all of the chemical formulas. I'll have all the questions pop up at once so that you can see where the words are located. You can kind of scroll around. That sort of eliminates some of the stress that people have about coming up with the words on their own. So that's what you should expect for next week. So how do you get there? How you get there is through this week. So that is going to be in what we have labeled as week 2. So I have 5 activities here, and you are welcome to do all 5, but you must do at least 2 to earn 10 points for this week's lab. The first is basically to create flashcards, and Quizlet is a way that you can create flashcards online, and it's free, and a lot of my students find it super useful for quizzing themselves. I have directions here, and then how you can share your flashcards with me in the directions. Your second option is to complete and submit a minerals comparison chart. So down here you'll see option 2, minerals comparison chart. What I've basically done in there is pulled out minerals that people frequently confuse with one another, like halite and calcite, for example. So I ask you this week to look and say, okay, next week, how am I going to figure out if I'm looking at halite or calcite? So it's sort of gives you an opportunity to take sort of some of that stress about next week about how you're going to figure things out by figuring out what possible stumbling blocks might be and how you're going to solve for them this week, so that next week will be a less stressful experience for you. And you can share that completed comparison chart with me below. I'll show you how in just a moment. The third option is to identify mystery minerals. So basically, mystery minerals are the same set of minerals that you looked at, different versions of the minerals, but they don't have numbers on them. And that's because students seem to accidentally memorize mineral numbers. So they'll memorize that number 2 is graphite, but next week, number 2 might not be graphite, but the properties of graphite are the same. So basically I've made a video here, and I think it's about 14 minutes long. It's all 30 minerals, and you can go through and take your best guess at their identities, and then I gave you the answer key below. So this is a good way for you to practice. It's not necessarily where you start because this is sort of a challenge, but I think probably I sort of put them in order that I think makes the most sense to do, or that I've seen students do. Option 4 is a more time-consuming option, but you're welcome to try it, and that is to redo last week's lab. So I took videos of a different box of minerals, and they have the same numbers. You can use your charts, you cannot use your charts, but regardless, you'll see additional versions of each mineral. So you can go through and complete that. And if you go down here to option 4, here's the 13-minute video with all 30 minerals, and all of the tests are done on them as well. And here, option 4, last week's lab revisited, is basically it'll pop out in its own window so that you won't have to kind of scroll back and forth, but you can go through and try it again, basically, for additional practice. You don't necessarily have to do it for every mineral or for every question, but it's useful to kind of check yourself. Okay. So option 5 is also really useful, and that's to take a practice minerals quiz. So basically this will simulate what next week's questions might be like. There are 9 questions. They have samples that are embedded right within each question, and you'll get a chance to see what sort of questions you can expect on your practical. You can take it as many times as you want. If there are things that you think might be more helpful, or additional resources that you think might be helpful, shoot me an email. These are 5 things that we do in our face-to-face classroom, so I wanted to give you that option. So then the way you're going to earn your 10 points is basically by telling me what you did. So you have to tell me how you completed 2 of these 5 assignments. If you completed all 5, that's cool. Let me know. If you attach a minerals comparison chart, I'll read over that and give you any feedback. There's a Dropbox here, basically. If you created a Quizlet, you can copy and paste the link of the Quizlet into this area. And whatever else you did, just let me know. So you'll click here, and basically you can either write a submission and tell me what you did, or you can attach files if you want me to attach those, if you want me to look at those. I will edit the date for this before I update it, and then you just submit it and you're good to go. So that basically is a quick overview of what you can expect next week and how you can prepare for it this week. And I just wanted to get this video out to you to kind of introduce everything so you had a better understanding of what the next couple weeks will look like. Thanks, guys.